Hey, welcome to another broadcast of A Minute To Midnite with your host, Chris.
And Tony.
Hey, welcome. And hey, it's been another topsy-turvy couple of days. We've just had Greece is the word, and the word is no. Come out of Greece. What do you reckon's going on there, Tony, from here on out?
It's going to be really interesting because I don't know whether the EU really ever thought that Greece would vote no. I think they were probably thinking they'd vote yes, so they were strong-arming them, trying to convince them that, or threaten them that they must vote yes. But the people didn't. They voted no. So we shall have to see where that leads.
Yes, prior to this, I listened to a few pundits and they're saying that they were pro-yes. And we're saying that that's what was going to happen. But now that it's a no vote, what is going to happen?
I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. It looks like it's going to be a rocky road and quite possibly the beginning of a severe decline for Europe and possibly for the world, I think, Chris, in terms of where we're going. Collapse looks on the horizon to me.
Just a matter of where to from here, and to get our listeners a bit of an idea on where is it from here. With this no vote, what does it mean?
It means they're going to have to negotiate something, but from what basis? Not sure.
Do they have some legislation which allows Greece to stay in the Union? Because if it breaks up, they don't want that, do they?
It's hard to know exactly what's going on, but it would seem to be that if they can't hold Europe together, it doesn't look good for them trying to hold a whole new world order together, but perhaps they have an ulterior plan that we don't know about. We'll have to watch the space, I think.
I see the Victoria Nuland is going to Greece to possibly sort out the situation between Greece and Russia. And talking about Russia, Russia's claims to have a super weapon that disables Western satellites and long-range arms. There's an article coming out today which says that Russia's boasting a major advance in electronic warfare, enabling Vladimir Putin's armed forces to zap foreign military satellites and switch off enemy weapons. The new system will muzzle the guidance systems of Western cruise missiles and other high-precision arms. Its Russian makers say it is fundamentally new electronic warfare system which can be mounted on ground-based as well as air and sea-borne carriers. The new technology will fully suppress communications, navigation and target location and the use of high-precision weapons. That came out of the Mirror news in the UK.
Right, that's interesting, especially with Cold War-like relations seeming to be developing again between Russia and the West. It is interesting that perhaps that's a bit of another Putin flexing his muscles, saying don't stuff around with Russia because we're a nuclear power and you can't just treat Russia as if we're Iraq or something. So they're basically saying, hang on a second, step back. And the fact that Victoria Nuland is going over there, she was instrumental, I believe, in initiating the coup in the Ukraine. So perhaps the same thing is coming in Greece. They want a coup there. It's just interesting timing that she's there.
Wars and rumours of wars. There was another incident, 2 incidents on the weekend off the coast of California and Alaska. 4th of July present from President Putin. He sent a couple of Russian bombers and they were intercepted by US Air Defence Force and guided away.
Not looking too good.
No, that's what happens when you poke the bear in the eye.
Yes, exactly.
Now I hear also there's a silver squeeze.
Yes, according to the Zero Hedge website from the 7th of the 7th, an article titled US Mint Runs Out of Silver on Same Day Price of Silver Plunges to 2015 Lows. Apparently the US Mint says it's sold out of 2015 American Silver Eagle coins and sales won't resume for another 2 weeks. Also, apparently, the UK Royal Mint said a week ago that during June they had experienced twice the demand for sovereign bullion coins from their customers based in Greece. And several others' sales have also been reported as much higher than normal, according to this article. I'm pretty sure that it's only going to get worse, and we're only at the beginning of it. Somebody's stockpiling it in America. Who it is, whether it's JP Morgan, don't know, but India is certainly breaking records for the amount of silver that they're importing at this moment. So we'll have to wait and see what happens there, but it's certainly looking like a squeeze that will only get worse as economic conditions get worse.
Yes, well, American imports of silver have increased 33% over the first quarter of 2014. Yeah, just coming back to Greece, we just got to look once again and see what's happening there and how it could reflect into the global scene. We're seeing already talk of the supermarket shelves being emptied. Of course, there's no cash coming out of machines now. That's a dilemma for the average Greek.
Well, there's still, at the moment, they're able to get 60 euros out, but there's talk of that'll run out soon.
Yeah, there's only so much available to them. Last count, it was 500 million euros.
Yeah, well, I did read some people going to ATM machines there and finding once they finally get there in the line that their machines are actually empty and they can't get any cash out anyway.
Right. So when they stock them, there's only going to be $500 million worth of euro to spread around thousands and thousands of ATMs. So therefore, how long's that going to last?
You know, I don't think that's going to stop with Greece though. It's going to be something that'll cascade and affect other parts of Europe and then eventually the world. But, you know, one thing that I've believed is that this is an orchestrated crash. It's not an accident, and many people, I think, fail to see that. They just think these events are happening out of the blue with no planning. But I think there is actually a guiding hand behind all this. It's interesting. I've sort of read and listened to different people that were like ex-Illuminati, people that have converted out of the Illuminati, and what they have had to say about the long-term plans of the Illuminati or the elite and the cabal. One particularly interesting interview done by Henry Mackau about 2001 or so was with an Illuminati defector called Svali. And here's just a little excerpt from an interview that he did with her back then. And so this is the words of Svali. The Illuminati has planned for a financial collapse that will make the Great Depression look like a picnic. This will occur through the maneuvering of the great banks and financial institutions of the world, through stock manipulation and interest rate changes. Most people will be indebted to the federal government through bank and credit card debt. The governments will recall all debts immediately, but most people will be unable to pay and will be bankrupted. This will cause generalized financial panic, which will occur simultaneously worldwide, as the Illuminists firmly believe in controlling people through finances. Next, there'll be a military takeover region by region, as the government declares a state of emergency and martial law. People will have panicked. There'll be an anarchical state in most localities, and the government will justify its move as being to control panicked citizens. So that sounds very much like a plan that I can see unfolding as we speak. Remember, the end goal of these elitists is a new world order, world government.
Wow. That could instill a lot of fear in our listeners.
Well, I don't think it should instill fear so much. Just give us warning and a heads up that that we should be doing something to prepare for what's coming. I'm sure some people will have heard of Jonathan Kahn and his books The Harbinger and The Mystery of the Shemitah, and how we are in a cycle at the moment that culminates in September this year, And he's also been and spoke before the UN and on Capitol Hill warning America and others what's coming. A 7-year cycle has been in existence for economic crashes, and we're due in the fall, the Northern Hemisphere fall, or our spring down here in the Southern Hemisphere this year, 2015, if it follows the same pattern, for the next great financial crash to actually begin.
Right. Once again, we need to be vigilant, but we need to also be aware that God is in control here. As we've said in previous broadcasts, that there's 3 things we need to have in place here. First is to have our spiritual lives in order. Secondly, we should have our food and shelter sorted. And thirdly, we should have our economical situation sorted.
Yeah, that's true. That's good there, Chris. I think people also might want to consider, I mean, it's quite late in the piece now if we do end up with this crash escalating quickly into September, October, and into 2016. But I think people that are in big cities are going to be the hardest hit. So you could think that if it's possible to, even at this late stage, think about getting out of big cities, it could be the safest place to be, because shortages are going to occur in the cities pretty rapidly, I believe.
And I think it's good for us to take note of countries such as Greece, just to see what plays out and what could possibly play out in other areas around the world. We've also had previous countries who have had economic crashes. Of recent would be Zimbabwe, for example. Be good to do some research on what happened to Zimbabwe just prior to their economic crisis and what happened during it, as well as Argentina. They've had various economic slumps over the last 3 or 4 decades. So it would be interesting to see exactly how it plays out, or how it played out for them, and how it could well be going to play out for the Western world as to what's coming, or for the globe for that matter.
Well, that's right. I mean, people in America or even here in New Zealand, most people would think, oh, no, it can't happen here. It can't happen here. No, that stuff only happens in third world countries and somewhere else. But it could very well happen. In fact, I believe it will happen. And if we go back to what I mentioned before about the Illuminists' plan, they're planning this for the globe, because that's how they will implement their New World Order. They will bring the New World Order, the word order, out of chaos. That's their plan. They cannot fully establish the New World Order until there is sufficient chaos that they'll have to step in as the saviours. So I believe, looking at that we are very likely to head into a global pandemonium, financial pandemonium, that will make the Great Depression look like a picnic, as was mentioned before. So, Chris, in the light of that, it would have to be prudent to begin to, well, even at this late stage, hopefully many people have done more than just begin. But even if you haven't begun, at least begin now with some sort of preparations, don't you think there, Chris?
Oh, definitely. What are some things that you would prescribe as to...
Well, there's a number of things that could become issues during an economic crisis or a crash, a global crash. In fact, some of these, well, many of them would also likely be issues during natural disasters. So let's run through 10 things, 10 scenarios, and give the listener some questions regarding each of those so that they can decide for themselves how they would best deal with each of the situations. For a start, number 1, food shortages can happen. You can't be sure that the supermarkets will remain open or that the shelves will be stocked. How much food do you have stored? How long would it last? Do you have any way of growing food? Do you have a garden? It could be a good time to think what vegetables you could grow, what fruit you could grow. You would want to try and have things that are grown from non-hybrid seeds if possible, heritage seeds with vegetables, so that you can regenerate the seeds if necessary from one generation to the next, because many of the modern hybrids you can't do that. They won't germinate. So that's one area to consider. You need to do some good thinking for yourself on exactly what food to get, but the main issue is to realise that the supply lines could run short, so you need to do something about it now.
Yeah, right. In the advent of an economic crisis, the first thing to go is your transport hub.
Yeah, exactly. And if that's the case, no transport, no food getting to supermarkets. So, what do you think in terms of food, Chris? How much would you suggest that people should be storing? How long would you be thinking they should be storing for?
A good rule of thumb would be 3 to 6 months. I would imagine. And you'd definitely stock up on the staples, as in rice, flour to a certain degree, all the dried fruits and as well. I mean, like apricots and dates. They've got high energy values in them. So another good way is through freeze-dried foods. There's a few outlets here in New Zealand you can buy from. One of them that I'm having an association with is survivalfoods.co.nz. They supply such food for an economic crisis, or for us, this nation. You've got to remember, it's not about just an economic crisis that can hit us tomorrow. Natural disaster could hit us. We're prone to volcanic activity, earthquakes, of course, tsunamis. Our weather patterns are quite disruptive. So it doesn't have to be an economic crisis that we need to be preparing for here. We should all have, right now, a supply of food ready to go for such situations.
There's also, of course, cans. Cans can last up to 10 years, many of them. And if you rotate them, there's no reason why you can't have cans on supply for a long time. Kidney beans, tomatoes in cans, I mean, you name it. There's all kinds of stuff. Canned fruit, of course, and then you have greens. Dried peas, things like that for greens, because you're going to want to make sure you got good variety in your diet. Otherwise, you can end up with vitamin deficiencies or scurvy or different things. So number 2, medicine. Medicine can become scarce during an economic collapse. So do you have a basic medical kit on hand? Do you have plasters, bandages, painkillers? Also, prescription medicines. How much of them do you have? How long could you last?
I mean, that could be quite a concern for those that are dependent on their prescriptions.
Yeah.
And there must be lots of people in that situation. And if the pharmaceuticals aren't around in such an environment, we're going to have some other issues surround us that, are not just going to be related to food and water.
We would suggest you make sure you've actually got a well-stocked medical kit on hand, and also any prescription medicines that you would need. Keep as much as possible on hand. So number 3, when an economy collapses, so might the power grid. So if the power grid goes down for a long period of time or is down intermittently, how will you cook? How will you light your home or stay warm? Do you have plans in place to cover that? And what are your plans? So we all might come up with different ones, but some examples we could use would be solar.
Of course, gas. Make sure you've got a couple of spare gas bottles for your barbecue.
Yeah, basically, and some people will be able to use wood and fire to cook as well. But there could be some issues with that, and particularly in cities, if there's an economic collapse and people are going hungry and they smell somebody cooking over a fire and see smoke, that's going to be an instant attraction for attention. So you've got to think, how could you cook, depending on where you are, because obviously that may not be an issue for people in the countryside. But if you're in the middle of a city and there's hungry people, you got to think, how can you actually cook without attracting attention to yourself?
There are some solar cookers out there now too.
Yeah, that's another good option.
And they're not very expensive options either. They're quite affordable. And coming back to solar, I mean, just a solar panel hooked up to a little solar charger. I've got 2 of those at home. So they can be used for charging smaller items. So they'll be handy in such situations.
Yeah, well, you can get solar battery chargers even for like AA batteries and AAA batteries, and they'll charge up your rechargeable batteries, which would be handy for a torch or something like that. If you can't plug into the power grid, there's still options to charge up cell phones and batteries. And just a couple of points on petrol and diesel generators. Whilst they could be handy, remember that petrol has only a limited shelf life, and same with diesel, though it's a bit longer. And also the other thing is, if you've got a noisy generator running and your house is lit up like a Christmas tree while all your neighbours are sitting there in the dark, sorry, it ain't going to happen that you're going to sit there with your latte and eating popcorn while the rest of them are in the dark and hungry. You'd be asking for trouble. Okay, number 4, during an economic collapse, you can't even take water for granted. So, do you have any water stored? How much? And if water becomes scarce, do you have a means of purifying water? Store water in containers that were designed for water storage, or food grade containers, or alternatively well cleaned out old juice containers, like 2 or 3 litre juice containers work well. Adding a small amount of bleach will extend the shelf life of the water, but do be aware that not all bleaches are suitable for this. Some of them are actually poisonous, like I wouldn't use Genola. But in New Zealand we have a product called Chlorogene, which is recommended for this, and it has an instruction even on the container as to how much to put in for 20 litres of water, for instance. I think it's a cap full. 20 litres is the equivalent of just over 5 gallons.
Yeah, water's a biggie. It's important that we do stock up on as much water as you can, and put it into a storage facility, dark, preferably, and have a purification system set up as well.
Obviously, you can't do much without water. You can survive, quite some time without food, but without water, you're only going to last 3 days. So water's a real big one. And also you'll need it for cooking. So the more water you can have stored, the better. And as Chris mentioned, having a purifying system is also a really good option, one that doesn't need to rely on electricity. Point number 5, during an economic crisis, your credit cards and debit cards may stop working. So if that happens, and you can't go to an ATM machine, and bank accounts are frozen, do you have plans in place to cover this? So we've covered that a little bit on our other previous broadcast, but Chris, perhaps you could just give a very brief outline on that.
Yeah, well, we need to have some cash. So if you've got cash available, make sure you grab a portion of that out of your bank accounts. And as Tony's already mentioned, we mentioned it on a previous broadcast, that your bank accounts aren't safe at present anyway. So you need to take that that money out of your account in the form of cash and hide it somewhere, just in case, or just for this rainy day when it occurs, because you're certainly not going to be able to get it out of the bank. The other option is to have some gold and or silver available. So you need to purchase some of that, because you're going to need that as well, as we will explain shortly.
Yeah, actually, and that brings up a good point, because what's happened in Greece with the shutting of banks, people that have their gold or silver stored in bank vaults or bank safe deposits, they can't get access to it when the banks are closed either. So you really want to keep anything like that out of bank vaults and bank safety deposit boxes.
Okay, number 6, crime, rioting and looting become commonplace during economic collapse. If this occurs, how will you protect yourself, your family, your assets? Now, we would urge you to look at this for your own situation and to see how you should prepare for this. But you can prepare in some ways by using specific security systems. Even though they mightn't work with the power grid going down, they do have backup. There are backup systems there you can use with batteries, etc. These can be a deterrent for looters etc. Another thing you can use is dogs or a dog. They're a good deterrent. And of course, you could spruce up on your own martial arts if you like.
Yes, yep, agreed. And obviously there's the issue of weapons, but we're not going to get into that here.
No, that would be specific to your situation.
And your country, the laws of whatever country you're in too.
Right. So, there are things that you can do because in an economic collapse, that is going to be an issue for some.
Next, number 7, during a financial collapse, many people will start bartering. So here's some things to consider. Do you have anything that you could use as bartering items? Think about what people may want or need at a time like this and figure out what you could have stashed as bartering goods. I think things like cigarette lighters, that's people are going to want lighters. That's one thing that could be a really useful bartering item in the future. But there's numerous other possibilities.
Yeah, well, food's a good one. I mean, rice is a good one. It's affordable. It can go a long way as far as keeping your sustenance up. And it keeps for a long time as well, and it becomes a good tradable item. A cup of rice could go a long way in such an environment. The other thing is just simple everyday life things like toilet paper, for example.
Yes, big one.
That can become a really valuable commodity in such tough times.
I think it would be good for people to do some research as to what the items that disappear quickest are off supermarket shelves. And that could give you some ideas straight off as to what you could have to barter with. Well, firstly, to have covered for yourself, and then to have extra items to barter with.
Okay, number 8, your currency may rapidly lose value during an economic crisis. If this happens, then gold and silver will be what is left standing, which is why you should have some. What can easily happen is an inflationary environment at the outset of an economic crisis. This means that things go up in value rapidly, therefore your dollar loses value rapidly. So in this situation, if you do have cash, you use that first. If you have silver and gold, you use that last.
Yes, I've heard it said that in the early stages of an economic crisis, cash is king. But after that, eventually it becomes useless.
It does. It becomes valueless. It can lose its value very quickly. So that is why, once again, we urge you should get some physical silver.
Good points there, Chris. And number 9, you can't be sure of continuous employment or ongoing business. So if you lose your job or your business becomes slow, do you have any alternative ways of making money or doing business? You'd be really wanting to consider that now before it happens.
Yeah, that's a hard one, isn't it? It's like everyone's going to be affected here.
Exactly, that is.
We're going to be on the Titanic together.
Yes, there'll be some sort of trades and jobs that'll be more likely to be needed all the time, I think. So you consider, well, do you have some skills that could be useful during the economic crisis? Maybe hone those skills up now.
Number 10, the government will not save you. And then it will affect governments and the ability to have handouts and help. So what's that going to do to the likes of those that are on the benefits?
Well, the benefits are largely going to go under the crash.
What will happen to those that are on benefits? What are they going to do to survive?
Time to prepare now. I mean, even if you're reliant on a benefit of some description now, you can think, well, how can you prepare yourself in advance so that when that benefit is possibly cut, that you're still going to be able to survive? Again, it comes back to, are you storing the necessities? That means you could get by for a period of time.
But this is also where the community has to get together as well, because, and in particular families coming together, knowing those that their loved ones that do rely on such benefits. You think of the retirees, the parents of those that are working, that aren't working, that are receiving retirement benefits. It's a time for people to get round family. and to support one another.
Yes, that's good points, Chris. Some additional thoughts here. It could be wise to try and pay off your debts as far as you can now. And don't waste money on unnecessary luxuries. Perhaps think about what you could be doing with that money that would get you prepared rather than spending it on things you don't actually need at this point.
Yeah, instead of going for the coffee a day, put that money aside and start looking to the likes of buying some physical silver.
Yep, and you could also look at perhaps trying to get ahead on your rent payments or mortgage payments.
Yeah, and then also think about things like candles, as you've already alluded to, lighters or matches, because we're going to need those things in a financial crisis, as well as any natural disaster that may be imminent.
Okay, Chris, we've covered a fair bit of information there. One other thing I'd just like to add is for people that are living in America that are wondering what to do with their 401ks and their investments, you could perhaps check out a website called survival401k.com. A lot of useful information there.
It's not up to us to scare or to bring fear. It's up to us for you to be prepared. So from me, Chris,
and from Tony,
it's goodbye.